Thank you, Andrew. All right, so it is officially 7 p.m., so we can get started. So I will call to order the Tiverton Town Council meeting of Monday, September the 14th, 2020. And we'll start by standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilor Edwards has our flag. Thank you. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, John. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilor Hilton,
Present.
Councilor Edwards,
Present.
Councilor DiMederos,
Denise?
Present.
Councilor Clark,
Present.
Councilor Briggs, Councilor Cook,
Present.
Councilor Perry is absent.
Get down.
And we also have with us this evening, of course, interim town administrator Christopher Cotta, and Solicitor Marcello, and town clerk Nancy Mello, and deputy clerk Jeannie B. So we will start with the consent agenda. Item A, approval of town council minutes, the meeting of August 24th, 2020, regular session, and August 24th, executive session. Item B, acknowledge receipt of minutes from boards, commissions, and committees. There are 2 sets from the Board of Canvassers, 2 sets from the Planning Board, minutes from the Building Code Board of Appeals, the Zoning Board of Review, and the Planning Board of Appeals. Item C, acknowledge receipt of reports. The first is the Police and Fire Department overtime reports, August 2020. And the second is the department monthly reports, August 2020. And item D, acknowledge receipt of correspondence. The first is the Town of Coventry, a resolution on state funding for COVID-related expenses. And item 2, the Tiverton Conservation Commission Septic Smart 2020 campaign. Would any counselor like to remove something from the consent agenda? Counselor Driggs?
A1 and C2.
A1 and C2. Is there anybody else?
Yes, I would like to pull C1.
Okay, anyone else? In that
Yeah,
case,
excuse me.
go ahead.
Yeah, 4A1 and 4A2, as I was not present for that.
So
Abstains from it.
that should be changed then, that Counselor Clark abstains absent, correct?
Yes.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, I will adjust that.
Okay. So we will note that Counselor Clark, although you can vote on everything else, is abstaining from those 2 items. Do I have a motion to accept the remainder of the consent agenda? Or, I'm sorry, Counselor Edwards, did you have something you wanted to remove?
No, I was going to make a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 4A1, 4C1, and 4C2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Counselor DiMederos? Denise? Denise? Yes. Counselor Clark?
Yes.
Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Counselor Driggs?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, 4A1, Counselor Driggs?
I just have, I think there was more of a discussion that is not included on page 5 under 8, where it deals with the town solicitor, the Justin Catesby Town of Tiverton, and Nancy Mello in her official capacities, the town. It definitely talks about Marcello wanting to expedite the service process. And I recall we had quite a bit of discussion, and there's no indication in that paragraph what the result of the discussion was. I think the decision was made that he could accept service, but it's not apparent in the minutes. So I would like that
doesn't have to be in there.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The whole thing?
Yeah, Nancy, I didn't get what
Okay.
you were talking about.
Okay, so on page 5 of the minutes that
Mhm.
August 24 minutes, it deals with Solicitor Marcello said he had been notified of the lawsuit filed by Justin Katz in Superior Court, and that he was requesting permission that Mr. Katz has not yet served anyone, which is Mr. Katz's obligation to do. But in an effort to expedite this process, the solicitor requested permission to accept service on behalf of the town and Ms. Mello. And there's no indication in the minutes whether that was allowed, and that's what I'm requesting. Or whatever the conclusion was. I remember there being discussion.
Madam President,
Take a
Yes,
vote.
John.
as I recall, there was no vote taken because it was merely on the agenda for announcement. So we did discuss, there was playful banter back and forth, but in the end, there was nothing to vote on because there was nothing on the agenda to vote on.
That's essentially how I recall it too.
The minutes indicate that? That's my question.
Solicitor
It's an
Marcello,
announcement. I mean,
yeah, Solicitor Marcello, do you have a thought on this?
We did have a lengthy discussion about it, and I walked away with the impression, at least the consensus, that I was not allowed to accept service. So I don't know. I know there's no vote.
Correct.
I would put that in the minutes then, because it just seems weird. There's no,
We can add. You can just add it that
I can
Okay.
add, you were
wasn't directed,
not
but
allowed to accept service for the town.
correct.
You don't have the ability if you're going to accept it for the clerk, but for the town, I'll put that you were not allowed.
Okay, Denise, did you want to add something?
No, I remember it the way that John remembers it. That's why I had to repeat it, because I wasn't quite sure where we were going here.
wasn't either,
The
but I
judges
just,
say that we said yes. So I recall we did not make the decision to do that.
Right. Okay, item C1.
Okay, my question is, I'm trying to figure out the overtime report for the fire department. It's a little bit different. And I can't see if we're making any headway with the $2,000 weekly overtime. I can't. I would need an in-service to be able to make this out. I want to know if we're in compliance, or I know what was left before was that there was some type of meeting with acting chief about, what was going on with the overtime and how there was come up with a plan to keep a better watch over it. And I don't know what the conclusion was on that. And now I've got this report, which is fine, but I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be looking at as far as weekly.
Chris, do you think you could briefly, although it may be that it might be good at some point if Counselor Driggs Counselor Cook sat with you.
Trish, I've sat with Chris and I don't understand this at all either. So,
Okay.
so I don't understand what I'm supposed to be looking at as actual overtime.
That's my problem. I don't know what I'm looking at.
So as far as it looks like we're over, but I don't understand some of this.
Chris, do you have any comment you'd like to make, or maybe we need to put this on for an agenda discussion, or possibly ask the format be changed so it's a little clearer?
Sure. All I can explain is that it's all overtime, and that $2,000 provision applies to all overtime. But what we tried to do is break it out so you could see what's actually causing it, what the actual categories are that's causing the overtime. So
Okay.
with some respect, there are some things that are just totally outside, and we've had this discussion before of, is it the men's personal time, their vacation time, their sick time? If you look at it, no, it's not. There are a lot of other things that are causing this to have an issue. Quite frankly, having an acting chief is, having family medical leave is, and, put people in the academy and those kinds of things. So this is supposed to give you a pictorial bi-weekly of everything that's going on related to the overtime. But I can sit with you and go through it if you want.
Can I say something?
Sure.
During my discussions, there's some stuff that is, I'm going to put this very simple. There's some that's caused by us, the administration, because of certain things, but there's other things that aren't, but it's not tagged that way. And if you really look at that amount for August 3rd through August 17th, we're way over. And I'm not sure what we're disallowing. And I don't think we, as a council, have had a discussion on what we believe is something that is caused because the administration has caused it. And for instance, the acting fire chief would be one, right? We don't
Correct.
have an acting fire chief, it's causing overtime. Yes, that's something that the town has to take responsibility for. But the rest of this, I'm not quite sure if it should be disallowed. And I think as a council, we should talk about this and maybe put it on another agenda so that we could go into more depth on this.
Okay.
I think, why don't we do that? Add that to the agenda for the next time. Madam Clerk, could you make a note of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Donna, I do agree with you. You would need an in-service to understand this. And,
No.
and I thought I did, but it's getting a little bit
Um,
complicated.
Yeah, it just looks like it's all over the place and absolutely looks so out of control to me. I don't know.
Well, I do think as part of that discussion, it would probably be good for us to get an update on what the status of the per diems are as well, because that was supposed to be something we were doing. So maybe we can add that to the next agenda discussion about this.
We can do that as well. And you also need to totally understand that during June, July, and August, there are 2 men on vacation, allowed to be on vacation. That's the only time during the year they're allowed to do that.
Right, and that was our concern going down to the platoons, because by doing that, you always have to have overtime. But that's why we were trying to get the per diems in to try to compensate for that, and that never happened.
Okay.
All right.
All right, item C2.
Yeah, that is me. This is under the administrator's report under DPW. They're under DPW 5, 6, and 7. There's indications of what PAIR is continuing. PAR, is it PAR or PAIR? PAR, I guess, is continuing to do. And one is to work on landfill operating permit, closure permit, and RIPTA's permit. Continue to work on recycle center plan, and is assisting town with requests to DEM to extend landfill use. And I was just interested if Chris could just sort of fill us in where we are on the permit, the recycle center plan, like what's going on with that exactly?
So the permitting it's still going through the process of being permitted for freshwater wetlands on the site that would be the recycling center. And there was also permitting that needed to be done, and which is annually done at the landfill itself. So those are the, as far as the recycling center goes, that's the only thing that's being done right now, is the permitting for the freshwater wetlands. I have had a number of emails back and forth with PAR about where we are with DEM. I do know their staff has not finished their deliberative review internally, but there should be some indication within the next week or so as to where we stand with the deferral of using the new recycling center and continuation of using the landfill.
Okay,
So
All right.
I don't have an answer with that yet from DEM, but we are getting closer.
okay, thank you.
In that case, would someone like to make a motion to approve items A1 and C1 and 2? John,
So moved.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Just the one addition on A1 that the solicitor agreed to put in, correct?
Yes, as A1 as amended.
Thank you.
Okay. So Councilor Clark,
Yes.
Councilor Driggs,
Yes,
Councilor Edwards,
Yes.
Councilor Cook,
Yes.
Councilor DiMederos,
Yes,
and
yes.
I'm also a yes. Thank you. So as far as I can tell, we do not have any comments that were received for this meeting, correct, Jeannie?
That is correct.
Okay, which brings us to appointments and resignations. We have two proposed appointments tonight. The first is the Harbor Commission, which is a 9-member board, 2-year terms. There are 2 vacancies, and there is 1 applicant. It is a reappointment. Paul A. Duart of 17 South Avenue requests reappointment to expire July 15, 2022. John?
I know it's a reappointment, so I know we go back and forth on this, but I'll make a motion to waive our normal procedure and we can appoint tonight.
Is there,
Second,
there's a second. So Councilor
second,
Denise, your vote?
yes,
Uh,
yes,
Councilor Clark,
Yes.
Councilor Driggs,
yes,
Councilor Edwards,
Yes.
Councilor Cook,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So, yes, John.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Paul Duart, 17 South Ave, to the Harbor Commission for a term to expire 7/15/2022.
Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second.
second,
Okay. There's a second. Councilor Clark,
Yes.
Councilor Driggs,
yes,
Councilor Cook,
Yes.
Councilor DiMederos,
yes,
Councilor Edwards,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So thank you to Mr. Duart for continuing to serve. The next is the Juvenile Hearing Board. It's a 5-member board, 3-year terms. There is 1 vacancy and 1 applicant, Melissa Quinlan of 25 Garden Avenue, requesting appointment to expire October 15th, 2023. I don't know, since it's a new appointment, Nancy, whether or not Ms. Quinlan was invited tonight.
She was invited, right, Jeannie? You let her know.
Once.
Yes.
Is she in the way?
She's not in the waiting room.
Okay.
She is not in the waiting room.
Not in the waiting room. Generally our policy is to interview new applicants. So maybe we should try for the next meeting and see if the clerk can reach out to her and just make her aware of, the procedure and hopefully she did get the Zoom invitation to join and all of that.
Okay, we'll check into it, put it on the next agenda.
Okay. But it's great that we have an applicant. Item 7, general business. The first is under me, Councilor Hilton, Robert's Rules of Order and Town Council Governance Policy. So we have just a short period of time left together as a council. And it is a sometimes fractious council, but recently I think that we have strayed away from some of the things that we should be doing. And frankly, there have been some complaints voiced and some Facebook discussions and other things about the council. So I thought in an effort to try and make the next month and a half as smooth as possible, that it would be good to have a reminder of a couple of things. First of all, our own governance policy refers back to Robert's Rules of Order. So matters that aren't addressed in our governance policy are covered by Robert's Rules. And particularly, there have been two things that have been happening lately that are pretty far afield. We don't adhere to Robert's rules on an incredibly strict basis, but we do generally adhere to them. And the first has to do with decorum during debate. And I printed out or had distributed to you copies of that. And specifically, it says, when a question is pending, a member can condemn the nature or likely consequences of the proposed measure in strong terms, but he must avoid personalities, and under no circumstances can he attack or question the motives of another member. The measure, not the member, is the subject of the debate. And recently, we've had some discussions where some counselors have made attacks against other counselors' character, against their motives, have used words like witch hunt or accuse people of political objectives, and it's simply not allowed under Robert's rules. And I would remind everybody that that's just not acceptable. There is, if we're going to follow this for someone whose character or whose motives are attacked, does in fact have the right to call for a personal point of privilege to respond. I hope that that's not where we're going to end up. But we've had some members who have been doing that lately. I realize that it's the political season, which translates sometimes to the political silly season. But I would please ask everybody that, when a counselor has a question, you are not, or puts forward a proposal, you're not supposed to question their motives or their character in doing it or make accusations against them. And that's been happening recently. I think it would be best for all of us if we refrain from that. The second has to do with the voting procedure, which is something that has been happening a little bit more frequently as well, which is essentially that once the debate is closed and we go to vote, really the only thing you can do is vote yes or no or abstain. But it's not an opportunity once we get to voting time to open up the debate or restate your position again. It will make things more expeditious. Technically, under Robert's rules, we could go by the strict guideline that nobody gets to speak more than twice on the topic. I think we try and let everybody say what they want to say, but and we don't necessarily stick hard to that rule, but once we get to voting, we would do that. And finally, while it's, sort of not here, just as a reminder for everybody who represents Tiverton, regardless of what board or commission you sit on or the council, that, these Zoom meetings live on in perpetuity. So, good decorum and representing the town well, I think, is appreciated by the voters. We don't really want to end up on one of those viral Zoom montages that gets distributed of silly looking municipal leaders. We have enough problems here without adding that to the list. So unless anybody has any questions or comments about this, I'd just like to ask us all, for the sake of the next month and a half or so, to keep Robert's rules in mind when we're discussing things. Any questions or comments, Councilor Driggs?
Oh, thank you. I appreciate being reminded of the Roberts rules. And because the agenda also mentioned the town council's governance policy, I sort of reread that, and I just want to remind everybody again too, which I sort of had forgotten about, that after being recognized to speak, this is under 3D, a member shall not be interrupted except by a point of order or to yield to another member. And that was nice to remember that once you have been recognized to speak, you should be allowed to say what you want to say.
I would completely agree, but I would also say, and this has happened a couple of times, that if you are going to speak and if you are going to either attack someone else's motives or their character or their personality, in other words, if what you're saying is outside of the standard decorum, then you may be immediately asked to,
I totally agree. I agree with the Roberts rules.
which you're kind of doing to me a little bit right now. So that is part of Robert's rules, but yes, everybody should get to finish. Does anyone else want to make a comment on that particular thing? Okay, well, like I said, we've just got a little bit to get through as a council, so we'll try and do it the best we can. That brings us to item B, Councillor Cook, discussion regarding the sales at Grinnell's Beach.
Thank you. Yeah, I've known, it's almost since July, I've been going past Grinnell's Beach, and I noticed the sales aren't up, and I finally said, well, I gotta ask about these sales, because there's, you know, if there's something wrong with them or something's going on. I didn't get any report from anyone, which was, you know, such an, really, it's almost an iconic thing that people look for now. So I don't know, you know, what's going on with them. Are they damaged? There was no report to the council about it. I don't know, you know, where they are, what happened, why they were taken down. So what's the story?
So I'll attempt to answer this if the council president would permit.
Absolutely.
So when we took the materials out from the winter storage, we did note that there was some damage to them during storage. There were a number of minor holes, and when I say minor, they're about the size of the end of like a highlighter, which would be the highest size hole. And then we had this pretty significant windstorm that came through here in August, and it was decided that we had talked to the vendor who manufactured them, and the warranty would probably not be valid for them because of the damage that was done during storage. So they were bubble wrapped, and they were put in containers that were too small, in my opinion. When they took them out, the metal brackets had perforated some minor holes. And with the storm coming, we did not want to have excessive damage done to them. And during the time that they were down, we found a vendor to see if we could have a sale maker actually do repairs to them to limit the amount of future damage, if anything. And it did take a little while for that vendor to get everything done, but we did pick them up today, and they'll be going back up this week. So that was just the story. It was unfortunate, but we just didn't want to take any further chance with them where we could have extensive damage to them without trying to effectuate some sort of repair to them.
All right, I have a follow-up question, Chris. Thank you for that. I'm just wondering, what kind of storage are we doing that something like that would be damaged? Apparently,
So I'll give you a little bit further background because I have the same questions that you had back in the spring when we opened these up. When the materials came, the people who put them up, our people from DPW, from the, our maintenance people, they did a pretty good job of understanding how they came, how they were packaged, how they were protected, but they never kept the original box. And the original box, after shipping and a couple of uses, wouldn't be sufficient anyhow. It was just a shipping box. They really needed, when they did store them, they stored them in barrels to keep mice away from them, which was a good idea, thinking that, trying to keep the mice away from them. But I don't think anybody realized when they stored them, even though they were protected with the bubble wrap on the metal clamps and the metal wiring, that when you push them down into a barrel, that you could actually do damage to them without realizing it. And then with the strain on them sitting there all winter and then opening back up again, the issue boils down to, I don't think they had proper containers to put them in. So, I think they tried their best to store them properly, but at the end of the day, they were damaged. And it was because of the storage container that they did use. And we are looking to have a different type storage container so that they are nowhere near as tight, that they can be folded and loosely held in a container and secured from having mice getting to them.
All right. My other question is what is it going to cost to fix them now? What's the cost of the repair?
To have the repair done, it was $255. But,
Mhm.
you know, and I know they've been down for a while, so it's, you know, a lot of people can question whether they were extensively damaged. Like I said, the damage wasn't extensive, but we were very concerned about leaving them up in a potentially strong wind that it could do more damage without being repaired.
So, where are they stored, Chris?
They they were stored in the Cornell's storage room in barrels during the winter time. We are now going to store them in a wooden crated box at DPW on a pallet up in an attic, up in an area where we hope the mice can't get to them. But we will try to make it so that even if mice do get around the box, that they will not eat through the box by laying fiberglass or some other material through it.
Okay. I was just concerned that, you know, when you store any type of canvas or anything down near a beach, it gets all mildew on it. It's just something that goes along with that, which, you know, compromises the sales. So, all right, I just thought maybe the DPW would have given some in-service to how to do it properly. And try to put in something too small, but oh well.
Yeah, well, you know, all good intentions. Unfortunately, it didn't work out the way that they had hoped. And you know, they were very apologetic about it, but it didn't mitigate the issue that there was damage done to them. And well, nobody could really notice while they were up and flying, but I had some real concerns, and so did Rick Rogers, about leaving them up in the middle of a, you know, significant windstorm without having any kind of repair done to them.
Okay. Does anyone think that they should be put up at this late date, or should they just stay down now?
I'm kind of hoping that we still have a very nice Indian summer, you know, kind of thing.
October.
Early,
Okay.
you know, November, I hope. Maybe
All right.
December.
All right.
We won't
Thank
keep
you.
them up that long, but we will put them up for a little while anyhow.
All right. Thank you for that.
Okay, Town Administrator, approval of engagement letter with Haig Shahadi and Company PC for auditing services for fiscal year 2021 and 22. 44,500, 45,000, 46,300 respectively, to exceed a total of $136,200, continued from the August 24th meeting.
So,
Trish,
Yes, Denise.
I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion.
Okay,
Nancy, I'll fill out a paper tomorrow.
just so that,
John, hang on a second. John, you have your hand up.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Madam President, we discussed this item at length before it came before us again tonight at the last meeting. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the engagement letter with Haig Shahadi and Company PC for auditing services for fiscal year 2021 and 22, not to exceed $136,200.
For discussion purposes, at least, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to add something to that, or if everybody's up to speed on the prior discussion?
I was just going to say the same thing, John, without making a motion, that it was on we just didn't have it on for a vote.
Right. Is there any other discussion? In that case, Denise? You're muted.
I'm not going to recuse, but I will abstain.
Okay.
There's a reason.
Okay. In that case, Counselor Diamandouros is abstaining. Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. Item D, Town Administrator, approval of Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank Community Septic System Loan Program for an additional $900,000.
So
Chris?
I'll give you a little bit of a history here, and I also have Carrie from San Angelo from the wastewater department as well. So one of the things that I was confronted with in late May, was there were a number of people calling the town hall looking for these low interest septic loan program that was the town had been engaged in. And I had a number of difficulties trying to gather information from Rhode Island Housing and from the state's infrastructure bank. about what our loan balances were, how many loans have been in existence, and where we were with this program. We were actually told that there was no available money. So through some deliberative process, we went through and worked with the infrastructure bank. We applied for a loan to bring us up so that we could start issuing these loans again. And the bank actually found that the last time the town did this in 2017, the same authorization for $900,000 was made. They expended or put $600,000 out in the market for people to utilize, and there was $300,000 in reserves that have never been called upon. So that money's sitting there. But again, this is a very popular program. I'm going to get into some of the mechanics of this. This program started in 2007, and the first loan was issued in May of 2007. All told, to date, there've been 106 loans, and they're capped at 25,000. Not all of them are at 25. There's a couple minor ones that were in the $5,000 or $6,000 range, but for the majority, they're between 50 and 25 grand. So my second real issue with this program was that we had never discharged any of the debts. There have been two major borrowings of this program for about $1.9 million. Actually, it was more than that. It was 2.2 million, I guess, because with that 300,000 is still sitting out there. So the Rhode Island Housing over the last couple of days has been very good about giving us a full accounting of all the loans that are outstanding. Of the original borrowings that were done the first series, there were 29 loans that were made that have been fully repaid to date. So of the 1.1983 is what was outstanding. 502 of it has been totally repaid. So there were 29 loans that have been totally repaid. From October of 2010 till now, there are an additional 77 loans, which to date have been paid up by $728,000. And there's still an outstanding balance that are continuing payments every month of $708,000. But without any additional loans available, loan money available, there are a number of people who are waiting in the wings to have this loan program made available to them. They can borrow up to $25,000, and there's a 1% fee for it. And that 1% fee pays for the servicing at Rhode Island Hospital, at Rhode Island Housing, and the infrastructure bank. The wastewater department actually helps facilitate the criteria for this, and it is only for septic systems that are failed. You can't use it to build a new septic system, and I don't believe you can use it to increase your bedrooms in your house. Let's say you wanted to add 2 more bedrooms, you couldn't use it for that either. The idea is when the wastewater department took over the on-site wastewater issues, trying to find all the old septic systems or the old beehives or there's a term I'm trying to, it's my tongue, I'm gonna spit it out.
It's a cesspool.
Cesspools. Anybody who had those, trying to mitigate those would be a good program for the town. Rhode Island Housing records these mortgages at the town hall. So they're required to, if they sell a property, that the new owner has to take on the debt service as well. So they agree to the same terms and conditions. There has never been a default on these loans. So I think right now we have about 8 people in the wings waiting for us to generate some monies. But ideally, it would be a good program to continue moving forward with. So I don't know if, before John, you have some questions, if Carrie wanted to add anything I might have missed.
No, go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
I'm going to make a motion to approve this thing, so I don't know how much further in depth we need to go.
I had a question.
Go ahead, Donna.
My question is, and I don't know if it's true or not, that once someone gets an estimate for the work to be done and they run and they hire someone, the person is not paid until after the work is finished and it's certified. Is that right?
That's accurate. Rhode Island, in partnership with Rhode Island DEM, in order to facilitate these loans, Rhode Island Housing does need to see a certificate of conformance, which is after the repair has been done.
So
payment is given then.
Thank you. So in essence, the company is kind of left paying for everything, waiting for the money. So the money, they're doing all the work with, I mean, it's not like it's a third and a third and a third. It's nothing. They do the work and they're funding it, hoping, you know, at the end that it's certified and they can get the money for the work that's done. Is that the way it goes?
Absolutely. And we would really hope that the people who are the contractors and designers who are creating these septic systems are doing quality work. In especially if it's a town loan program, we would hope that we have the highest quality who can actually perform those services.
And I have one more question, John, if I can finish, okay? The other question I have is the approval or the estimate. You get an estimate, if I know how this goes, you get an estimate and then, you know, you apply for the loan with that estimate. The problem is that you don't know what's under the ground until the work starts, and then it's not enough, and you can't amend it, from what I understand. I mean, if it's $20,000 worth of work, or and that's the estimate, and that's the approved loan. If you run into $10,000 worth of problems, that's it. Am I correct on that?
That's not incorrect, but just to clarify, most skilled contractors who are familiar with working with this program do encourage the homeowners and the property owners that if they are going to be close to the $25,000 maximum, to request the $25,000 maximum. If the estimate is going to be nowhere near the $25,000 maximum, those are the few times that they have asked for, you know, or $15,000 just to be safe. And then the loan closes well under it, which is generally more in line with the estimate that was provided. We actually do keep records in the wastewater district, and I've shared those with your town administrator that show exactly what estimate was requested on the pre-application that we send over to Rhode Island Housing, and then what was actually closed on. So you can we have records of how close those estimates and closings are. And in those cases, what we actually see as the trend is exactly what I said. If they get anywhere near 25,000, they just asked for the whole.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a motion from Counselor Edwards. Do you have a question as well, or just your motion, John?
No, I was going to motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions? In that case, if there aren't any, Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos,
Yes.
Counselor Driggs. You're muted, Nancy. Nancy, thank you. And I am a yes. So, Chris?
Just one clarity, that I will need the council president to sign the loan authorization on the administrator's behalf as part of this vote. But I did include an older version of it, and I should have mentioned it earlier, but I don't know if you need another vote to make that authorization for you, or if it's just perfunctory that you're allowed to do it anyhow.
Solicitor Marcello?
You're muted, Mike.
Mike?
I think we're all set. As long as the council approves it, she's going to be signing up. Council.
I will come in tomorrow to the office to get that signed for you. Item E, Town Administrator, approval of amended sewer easement agreement between the Town of Tiverton, the Tiverton Wastewater District, and Tiverton Recreation LLC, formerly known as Longplex LLC. Chris?
So Jim Long had contacted me from over at Longplex about, he's completed the sewering that was required to be put in for his facility. This easement that he utilized has been amended, so it needs council approval to amend it. And from here, it will go over to wastewater for them to accept to be part of their infrastructure. There'll be a purchase and sale that will effectuate that, and he will no longer own the storing.
Okay, so the easement agreement is, can you clarify for everybody exactly what the easement is for?
My understanding is for the land that he utilized to put the sewering in, he needed an easement for, in order to perfect that.
That is correct. And the reason it was amended is because when they initially went to do the construction, they ran into ledge and had to move a portion of that connection to the opposite side of the road. So simply amending the easement to notate that change.
Okay, so the one question I have, and I don't know the answer to this, but I just would like to make sure that this is correct, is that whatever needs to be in the land records amended from a plan point of view so that down the road this is nice and clear, because I don't know if the recorded land plan shows the new sewer location or not, and whether or not, and I don't know whether or not that's a problem, but it might be worth asking the planner just to double check that the land recording is now the recorded plan is now consistent with the easement, so there's no confusion in the future.
Okay.
Councilor Edwards.
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the amended sewer easement between the town of Tiverton, Tiverton Wastewater District, and Tiverton Recreation LLC.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any other discussion or comments?
I have one. I didn't know they changed their name. That was all. That's all. They used to be, they're not Longplex anymore. They're Tiverton Recreation.
Correct.
Did anything change with
I
taxes or
gather
anything?
that's true. So
I believe, just to clarify, I believe that the business still does business as Longplex, but I believe that the corporate name has been Tiverton, was changed to Tiverton Recreation actually quite a long time ago, I think.
Okay.
That's how it shows up in the documents, but they do business as Longplex.
Okay, thank you.
So if there aren't any other questions, Councilor DiMederos,
Yes.
Councilor Clark,
Yes.
Councilor Edwards,
Yes.
Councilor Driggs,
Yes.
Councilor Cook,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. Item F, Town Administrator, request approval of budget transfers. The first is from account 1050-7160 prosecutions to 1050-7159 litigation in the amount of $3,371.05. And the second is account 2190-5260, the ER health contribution to 2190-7920 buildings and personal property insurance in the amount of $4,330.36. Chris?
So working with Denise,
Denise?
trying to close out the books for FY 2020, there were some minor adjustments that actually made these things come to light. So
That was my
there is a need
question,
for a
whether or
transfer.
not, what budget it was. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
So there is a need to make an adjustment for these. We did get a late prosecutions bill, and our employee health contribution, or our employer contribution was a little bit higher than what we anticipated to be. So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Counselor Edwards?
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the budget transfers, the 337105 from prosecutions to litigation, and the 433036 from employer health contribution to buildings and personal property insurance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other comments or questions, discussion? In that case, Counselor DiMederos,
Yes.
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. Which brings us to Police Chief Jones, who I see has joined us, requesting approval of budget transfers. The first is from account 3330-5101, personnel salaries, to 3330-5104, overtime in the amount of $11,364.83. And the second is account 3330-7611, fuel, to 3330-6648, tires, parts, and maintenance in the amount of $2,978.21. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
So these expenses, just like the previous one, working with the administrator, are from fiscal year 2020 as well. The overtime issue, I will just say there's two issues that came up with the overtime. We're still waiting for some FEMA reimbursement for the COVID, which accounts for a majority of that overtime. Also, under the current IBPO contract, we're required to allow all of our officers to use vacation time. So given that none of the officers obviously took vacation time for March, April, and May because of COVID, then there was a mad rush to have all of the officers exhaust all of their vacation banks, which definitely increased our overtime for the last remaining months of the fiscal year. And to item number 2, in tires, parts, and maintenance, approximately $7,200 of that is also under FEMA reimbursements for the sanitation and the cleansing of the cruisers during the COVID crisis.
Do I have a motion on these transfers, Counselor Edwards?
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to approve the transfer of $11,364.83 from personnel salaries to overtime and $2,978.21 from fuel to tires, parts, and maintenance.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, is there any other debate or discussion? In that case, Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. Item H, discussion and possible vote of town council to appoint advisory committee to present recommendations regarding the town budget process and improvements to the existing town referendum. So just a little background on this. We will have an FTR this year. And the FTR will have only one budget that you can't vote no on. There's no option. And the only resolutions that are there are resolutions submitted by the budget committee that are completely dependent on and subservient to the budget. And I believe the cost of the FTR is about $15,000, Nancy?
It'll be between 13 and 15, definitely.
So we're going to spend $13,000 or $15,000 to have an FTR this year, when we know that we're in a fiscal crunch, even though there's no real option. There's only one budget and you can't even vote no on it. You can decide not to check the box or not to show up, but other than that, that's it. And I say that because the FTR came into being in 2012, and all the way along when it was originally presented, there were a lot of discussions about, as we got into this process, which was brand new, over time, it would need to be tweaked. We should think about tweaking it. We'll learn, we'll tweak it. And in the 8 years that it's existed, there's only one tweak that's ever been made, which was to move voting from Tuesday to Saturday. And, I think it's time to think about a tweak for it. And just the idea, because by the way, there are other communities that have FTRs, but they have language that says, if there's no alternative, we're not going to hold an election. If there's no alternative budget or no need to do this, we're not going to have an election and spend that kind of money when there's no choice. So other towns have language that allows that. I think, another thing this year that's come up, only one person has put their name in to be on the budget committee. One person is running for budget committee. And given the number of terms that are over, as well as the fact that there are some budget committee members who are running for other positions, it's entirely likely that our $50 million budget, in the end, we may have a budget committee that's composed of a number of write-in candidates, and not write-in candidates who are running write-in campaigns, write-in candidates like we had the last time, which included Donald Duck and alcoholic. And, you know, Nancy Mello was down to finding somebody who had had their name written in twice versus once. And we'd even got to the point of we're going to have pull names out of a hat of the one write-ins. You know, when you talk to people on the budget committee, they feel frustrated because part of the, you know, FTR language doesn't really let them reach out and advocate for the work that they've done. A competing budget can, you know, send out all the campaign materials they want and all the sort of, you know, do the campaigning and all of that, where the town's hands are tied and the budget committee, you know, can't even, the way the charter's written, send out a one-pager to the citizens explaining, you know, the budget. You know, in 8 years, we've got a combined total of 12 lawsuits and charter complaints. And every solicitor that we've had has said that, you know, there are parts of that language that aren't well drafted and are really, you know, problematic. And, you know, finally, this council voted to adopt essentially an emergency ordinance around the casino revenue because we are the only community in our FTR process that lets that lets electors make up their own revenue numbers with no justification required whatsoever. You can put in whatever revenue numbers you want in the budget in an alternate budget. We're the only town that lets people do that. So the original FTR was not actually generated by a charter commission. The original FTR language came from an appointed committee, a committee that was appointed by the town council. It was then originally known as the Financial Town Meeting Change Committee to make recommendations to move or to either change the financial town meeting or come up with something else. And that advisory committee proposed the financial town referendum. You know, as is the law, no advisory committee has any authority whatsoever other than to, you know, make some recommendations. The then council determined that they would take those recommendations forward and put them in front of the voters. I realize that this is a little bit of a touchy subject for some people. The idea of doing anything to the FTR is like the third wheel of politics here. But, you know, I do think when you're at the point that you're spending, you know, $15,000 on an election with no choices for people to vote on, you know, it's time to start and think about those long promised tweaks that we were going to make. And I do think that you know, potentially putting together a group of people who have some experience with this, and frankly, people from more than one kind of political viewpoint would be good too, to look at what the other communities do of similar size in terms of their budget, and especially to look at the other, I think there's about a dozen or 14 other communities that have FTRs, and what are the best practices that they have there that, you know, we might consider putting in front of the voters to adopt. So that's my thought. And I think that it was promised all along that we would have to tweak this. And I kind of think it's time to start thinking about it. Councillor Driggs.
So I appreciate the thinking that's going into this. I do have some thoughts I'd like to share. The first is I'm a little leery about starting something as a result of, if it has anything to do with the pandemic effect on the budgets, probably in every city and town in Rhode Island, maybe in the nation. It just seems that is not a reason at this point to decide our budgeting process and the structure of the FTR. it feels like almost like if a farmer decided he needed to alter and revamp and change all his crop growing process because of a once in a lifetime locust siege. I mean, I just think we've been through a horrible pandemic. It's had a huge effect on a lot of things, including revenue. The other thing that's I'm a little leery about embarking on and stressing how much the FTR or any part of it needs to be changed if it's a result of what we've gone through the last 4 months. Secondly, I'm a little concerned that, as you indicated earlier, Patricia, this town council literally has 3 more meetings before a new town council is going to be sworn in. 3 members of this town council are not even running again. And I have no idea what the makeup of the next town council is going to be. And I think for that reason, if every reason you've given that we should be looking at, is this time to tweak something, I think that should be left to the next town council, not us. I also have concerns about the proposed makeup of what you suggested of 5 people on the advisory committee. I'm glad to hear you just said you do think they should be at differing political persuasions, for better words. I was on the Financial Town Meeting Changes Advisory Committee. I was co-chair with Jeff Karen. And there were 6 members of that committee, and it was 3 and 3. Which I think is very valuable because it meant that any proposal that Changes Advisory made or decided to make to the town council had to garner at least 1 person from the quote unquote other side. So I think it's a nice check and balance to have that kind of division on the thing. And as we're all very well aware, whenever anything comes up to a vote in this town, having to do with whether casino gaming revenue or, I mean, look at all the town council proposals in the general election in 2018. They all got rejected, but they were like by 51 and 49. I mean, we are a very divided town. So I think it would be very, very good to have that split if you're going to do this. And then finally, it's just sort of very frustrating. I also was a member, as you know, of the Charter Review Commission that was created by the former town council, of which the 4 of you on majority on this one were members. And it consisted of 13 elected individuals. 3 of them are now on this town council, Donna Cook, Steve Clark, and myself. And out of the proposed 20 that the CRC, as you remember, gave to the town council, not one of them went to the voters in the language that it was used. But the town council did present on the ballot questions 4 through 11. And out of those 20 proposals the CRC gave to the town council, 8 had to do with existing budgeting and FDR suggestions. But the town council did put on the ballot its own questions 4 to 11. And those proposals dealt with budgeting, changes to the FDR, including having the solicitor independently review charter complaints, allowing the casino gaming revenue to be used on debt service, capital development and infrastructure, amending the charter to revise budget deadlines for the FDR, and that the FDR should meet debt service and contractual obligations, increase signatures for individual elected petitions, change format and process for submitting budget options. All of those things were put before the voters just not even 2 years ago now, and they all were rejected. So for all of these reasons, I want to put the brakes on this suggestion right now. I not rush into something. When I first joined the town council, one of the first things we did was to revoke the hastily thought out solar ordinance. And I just don't think there's any reason at this point to hastily go forward with this proposal and I mean, this committee, even if it does pass and people look to get applications for this committee, they're not going to be chosen until the new town council is in. And I think it's a weird time to be doing this. So for all those reasons, I'm going to vote against it. Thank you.
Counselor Edwards?
Thank you, Madam President. I think it's a good idea. I mean, I don't disagree that the timing is less than perfect, but then again, I think, you know, we as a body should be striving, we as a town should be striving to form a more perfect form of government. And it's quite obvious that, you know, with what we've seen with the pandemic, the way our FTR is structured is not the most perfect form of government. There are some things that are great about it. There are certainly some things that need to change, you know, and I can appreciate that there are members of this council that participated in getting us to where we are today. But, you know, the definition of insanity, I've said this multiple times, is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I feel like every year we find ourselves in a budget quandary. We spend a significant amount of taxpayer money to cast these FTRs. And in some cases where there's only one budget option, you know, we still hold the election. You know, there's certainly things that need to be changed. And I can tell you that, at least from what I've seen, we don't have all the right answers, because there are no other municipalities banging down our doors saying, hey, you guys in Tiverton, you've got the answer, right? If we were correct, if everything we had put together was the best form of government, everybody else in the country would be doing it. The fact of the matter is they're not. So we need to start thinking about, as a town, we need to start thinking about the best path forward. And we need to stop fighting each other tooth and nail on every little tiny issue, because it's not how we make positive change for the future. So, you know, I think that we should do it. The timing, you know, is certainly not the best, but when is the best timing, you know? And if ultimately we move forward and we put forward, you know, a committee that's going to be selected by the next town council, well, you know, that's great for the next town council, and they'll have a job on their hands and make sure it gets completed. But this is not about, you know, at least in my opinion, these ideas that are being put forward, and the idea of taking a look at the FTR is not about hurting somebody's ego. It's not about, you know, saying to somebody, hey, you did a bad job. I think it's about saying, hey, here's where we are today. We need to fix it going forward. And we need to make sure that, God forbid, another once in a lifetime event happens, you know, 50, 60, 80, 100 years down the road, you know, when my daughter's kids are still living in town, hopefully, that they're not stuck in the same scenario that we're stuck in today. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a comment.
Yes, Tom.
I really think that this is very unfair to the next council to pass something like this, and they don't really have to go forward with it. I just think it should be tabled, it put in front of them if they want to, and it should be up to them whether they want to go forward or not. We've only got 3 more meetings, and I just really don't want things done in haste. It just never works out very well. And I don't think it's fair to the next council either.
Okay. Denise?
I think it's a great idea, but I have to agree with Donna and Nancy that I think this needs to wait for the next council. And I do think it's a great idea, and I hope that the next council will move forward with this. But I think there's 7 different people, maybe some of the same, but it's going to be a different makeup. And I think that they should choose who, if they decide to move forward, they should be the ones to pick out who's on this committee. And they may have other things that they want this committee to look at too. So although I think it's a great idea, and if we had a year to be on this committee together, it would be a different story. But I think that this should wait until the next committee comes along. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I would like to comment on a couple of things that Councilor Drake said. First of all, I didn't put this forward having anything to do with the pandemic or this year's budget. As a matter of fact, this is not the first time we've only had one budget. It's happened before, at least once, possibly twice, I'm not sure. And both times after it happened, collectively, people said, you know, we should do something about this and not spend all this money on an election if there's nothing to vote for. But we never did. So that has nothing to do with the pandemic, nor do, frankly, the lawsuits. You know, the 12 lawsuits and charter challenges that I've mentioned, that's not from this year. It doesn't have anything to do with the pandemic. So I certainly don't think that the issues that I'm raising have anything to do with the pandemic. It has to do with a number of years of having the FTR and, you know, being willing to make changes where they need to be. As far as the language being, you know, drafted, I do seem to remember that the originally appointed committee was essentially a mix. There were 6 people. I think it was 3 and 3. But as time went on, 2 of the members who happened to be sort of on one side were elected to other positions and they were removed from the committee. The third on that side actually resigned because they felt it was political. And so essentially in the end, everybody who was on the committee that made the final recommendations were appointed by kind of one group. There was some debate about it. Bless you, whoever's sneezing, Chris.
Sorry, it's me.
And I do agree that that the council did put some charter changes forward before the voters. However, we put it all in one question. So there were a number of changes that were all rolled together in one question. It wasn't individual questions regarding the FTR. It was the second closest vote that year in the general election. I think if the casino revenue one failed by, you know, a handful of votes, this one with thousands of votes, I think the difference was 100 or so, maybe a little bit more. And I do think that it's probably would have been wiser to not roll all the changes into one single question. They probably should have been addressed individually. But I did want to say that I don't think this has anything to do with the pandemic and more to do with, you know, 8 years of experience. And, you know, it was promised all along that we would be tweaking this and we would be addressing the shortcomings. I do think it's time to do it. I will respect the fact that it seems that the rest of the council, other than Councillor Edwards and I, feel that the timing isn't good. So I am happy to leave this here, but I do hope that the future council will, you know, will take this up. It's time, you know, anything that you put into place, any process or procedure needs to be reviewed and needs to be improved. And I think it's time for this one. Madam Clerk.
I just wanted to make mention that I have been the one to try to facilitate that this FTR goes smoothly and the election process is smoothly and the process running up to it is, and the petitions and everything. And I do have to say, even the idea of the runoff, I have gone to the Charter Review Commission and made some suggestions. They didn't make it to the ballot, but I do have to say, it doesn't matter who the council is. It needs to get in the process. This isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to be a lengthy process. And it can only recommend back to the council. It doesn't matter. The new council could take the suggestions or not take the suggestions. It's going to take quite a while. You're going to be working with a council. So I'm not quite sure. I understand that this council is coming up to the end, but I have to tell you, this is my last financial town referendum I have to run. But the next clerk is going to find, I was kind of nurtured in by being the first one, and we kind of fumbled our way through to get to where we are now. But I got to tell you, when another clerk comes in, it is a really taxing process. And I am for the FTR. I am for going to the polls and voting. So I'm definitely am an advocate for the FTR, but I have to tell you, the system, I couldn't do a runoff if it happened. It would be impossible. You'd be disenfranchising voters. You can't send mail ballots out to everybody ahead of time and then say in a 2-week span, you're going to send out mail ballots. That wouldn't even work. You couldn't even get the ballot printed again that fast. So there are things in there that make absolutely no sense. It doesn't take away the whole process. It just cleans it up a bit. And I have preached this for several years. There really is no time like the present. I don't think you're stepping on anybody's toes. I think it's something that needs to be done. You've got parts in there that you couldn't even physically do if you wanted to. You just can't. And I know the intention. I worked with you and Jeff Karen and the committee, Nancy. I think you did a fine job to start it, but it was always said that it was going to be tweaked. And I think it is long past the time to tweak it. Long past.
Counselor Edwards?
Madam President, I'd like to actually make a motion on this, and I think everybody should get a chance to vote on it. So I guess, and I'm going to have to rely on Solicitor Marcelo to make sure I get this correctly, but I'd like to make a motion to create a committee to evaluate the financial town referendum. Committee will be made up of 5 members, and the council will look for applications from those members as outlined in the proposal. Good? Okay. I got the thumbs up.
Is there a second? Steve, you're seconding? Steve, you're on mute.
Yes, I will second.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second, so we'll take a vote. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Counselor Driggs?
No.
Counselor Cook?
No.
Counselor Clark?
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos?
No.
And I'm a yes, and the motion fails. But possibly the new council will reconsider. I do think that some members mentioned that in the future they would, if they're here, they would reconsider supporting it at a future date. Okay. Next is discussion on process for the interviews and hiring of town administrator. And I'm going to, hang on a second, because I have this on my phone and I just want to make sure that I'm being accurate about it. That the personnel board will be doing a Zoom meeting tomorrow night with the personnel board, and they're going to go through the 11 applications that they have to determine which ones are qualified to move forward. And then they hope to be meeting Tuesday or Wednesday next week. They might need 2 meetings to do Zoom interviews at which the council would be invited to sit and observe, not participate, but we could sit and observe. I don't know, Mike, if we're observing only if there's a quorum of counselors, do we have to post it as a meeting, or if we're just observing?
If you're just observing, not participating, no votes, no whatever, you're just watching, you're like any member of the public. You just can't obviously discuss it, how many applicants yourself after the meeting or before the meeting, but just kind of just as observers.
Okay. So if they get that set up, we'll be getting invitations to Zoom meetings to observe their interviews or their first round of interviews, and then they'll be passing along forward to us the candidates that they think we should be seeing, and we'll be, we'll be probably setting up special meetings towards the end of September to try and make a final decision. Any questions? John?
Patricia, those Zoom meetings that we can
I
watch
think I had the floor. But
are next
Yeah.
week?
Counselor Edwards had the floor, so hold on just one
I'm sorry.
second.
Okay, sorry.
what is the date that our interim town administrator will time out?
October 1st,
Okay, thank you.
October 1. Counselor Drakes?
All right, just, but when is the personnel board meetings that we can zoom in on?
They haven't told us. What they
Oh,
said
I'm
is
sorry.
that they're having a Zoom meeting tomorrow night to open up the resumes and go through that. And then they'll be trying to schedule some the following week. Keep in mind, I do believe that those meetings, the applicant has the opportunity for those meetings to be held in closed executive session. So the council may be invited to observe an executive session. I don't believe that first round of interviews on Zoom will be, but those will be public interviews.
Okay.
No other questions. Police Chief Jones is back requesting permission to advertise for position of police officer.
Thank you again. So we have exhausted our current list of eligible applicants for police officer. So this request is simply to start a process. And as all of you are familiar with the dates, we're very beholden to the Rhode Island Municipal Police Academy. So this is just a request so we can start the process, ask for applications, so we can create an eligibility list.
Go ahead, John. You had a question?
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to grant the chief permission to advertise for the position of police officer.
I'll second, yeah.
There's a second. Are there any other questions or any discussion? In that case, Councilor Clark,
Yes.
Councilor Edwards,
Yes.
Councilor Driggs,
Yes.
Councilor DiMederos,
Yes.
Councilor Cook,
Yes.
and I am also a yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Announcements, comments, and discussions. Town solicitor? Nothing. Town administrator, payment of outstanding legal invoices to Attorney Jean M. Scott.
So in past meetings, we've discussed these outstanding old legal bills, and the direction was to go and meet with the clerk and go over the prior bills of the past solicitor to determine what, if anything, this individual had been paid through the past solicitor for services rendered related to the work that she did related to the I got the thing out to my tongue. Comprehensive plan. So we did do that. We did find that she had actually been paid some monies, but there was still $6,700 that she had billed for that she had never been paid for. So I reached out to her and I offered to settle this at $3,500. She agreed for an amount a little bit higher at $4,000, and I'm processing the bills so to get this thing taken care of.
Okay.
So she did do work on behalf of the town. It is substantiated. It was a voluminous volume of work for the comprehensive plan, and she had not been paid by the prior solicitor. So I think we're totally obligated to pay her, and she's agreeable to an amount far less than what she billed for.
So,
Thank you, Chris.
okay. This isn't on for a vote, so I think it's just sort of an announcement, Chris.
Yes, and we'll be using 2020 monies to the best of my ability. This will not be paid out of this year's budget.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Madam Clerk, an update on September 26, 2020 FTR process and the November 3rd general election.
So the first one is the FDR process. The FTR is actually held on September 26th, the Saturday, at the Tiverton High School Gymnasium, North Brayton Road. And the voting there will be from 7 in the morning till 8 at night. There will be absentee voting at the town hall only on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, the 23rd, 24th, 25th, the 3 days preceding that. And that will go from 7 in the morning till 8 at night as well. There are mail ballot applications if you choose to vote by mail. You can get them on our town website, or you can just knock on the clerk door. We'll hand you one. There is a box outside the clerk's door, a lock box, a gray lock box. You can put the applications in there. We already have the ballots, and we have been mailing out the ballots as well. So many of you have already received the ballot, and we are getting the ballots voted back. It's the same process we use for the state elections, a series of 3 envelopes that you put the ballot in, everything's sealed, so nobody knows who's voting what. Then on the November general election, the state had announced on Friday, I believe, that they were going to be mailing out to active voters mail ballot applications. We've already received like over 900 of them, but they are mailing them out. Everything we have gets entered every day. And the emergency voting time for that begins on October 14th. The deadline to return your mail ballot application is October 13th. Again, you can knock on the door, the clerk's office door will take it for you and process it. You can put it in the drop box outside the town hall, or you can mail it to the state, which has given you the envelopes to do so and the postage paid. So that is going to take place on November 3rd. I'm not quite sure of the polling locations yet. We're waiting for more information to come down from the state, but they are in the process of reviewing the ballots. So those of you that had requested a mail ballot application, the ballots should start to be getting mailed out by the end of the week. That's all I have to say.
Madam Clerk, thank you. Counselor Driggs?
Yeah, Madam Clerk, I just have a question. When people get the request that they can send in a request a ballot, are signatures being checked? Is the process this? How do you know that the person?
Because the change in the state is that you don't require the witnesses on the envelopes, but absolutely that has to go into, we have to enter everyone into the CVRS, the election system, and those signatures have got to match. And we have denied some, yes.
All right.
What we usually do is call the person, and if it needs a change of signature, it often happens. If it needs a change of signature, we will get that person to come down and fill out a new registration form and make sure the signature, because people's signatures do change over years. But absolutely, we check. It has to be. You have to confirm it or reject it in that system.
Counselor Edwards?
Motion to adjourn.
Well, hang on one second, because Chris had his hand up, so let me just get.
I just have one question for the clerk. Will there be in-person voting in November, or is it all mail ballot?
No, they'll be in person
Okay.
voting, yes. I'm just not sure which polls and if we'll be able to combine any. We haven't heard yet from the state.
Okay.
We do have a meeting this next Wednesday, and the state representatives are going to be there. It's a Zoom meeting, but it's all there. But yeah, there's always going to be
Okay.
in-person voting as well. It's just a lot of these locations throughout the state are weary about letting us use them for polling locations.
Yep.
A lot of them are elderly housings, and so it is an issue, but we're working on it.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Counselor Edwards,
Motion to adjourn.
is there a second?
I'll second.
I'm going to just do a voice or show of hand vote. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Raise your hand.
Aye.